Hello,
But I
Mother.
feel hello, Carol.
We'll be discussing your family history, what and whatnot. Okay, so you've got two older siblings and two younger siblings, and I'm assuming that that was probably discussed in a different time with Olivia, so we really won't go into them too much. But how many siblings did Grandma have, Grandma Jane?
Oh, there were 11 children in her family. She had, there were 9 sisters. She was one of the 9, and 2 brothers. And if I understood correctly, her mother, though, even then had 22 pregnancies. And there, as I said, 11, and one child died in the beginning that was young, Eula May. But the rest of them survived and lived pretty good full lives.
Well, I thought with them, I think I got most of their names, so I'm just going to throw out a name and just what pops into your head on them. And like you said, Eula May, I think, was one of the oldest. Was the oldest.
She was the oldest.
And she died. Do you know what she died of?
I sometimes get it confused with Aunt Grace's oldest child that died, Betty Jo. She died of diphtheria, but I thought this Eula May did too, but I could be incorrect in
And
that.
she was young.
Oh, she was probably 6 months.
Oh, very young.
Oh, very young.
What about Aunt Pearl?
Aunt Pearl was one of Mother's oldest sisters. Everybody loved Aunt Pearl.
And-
She was a great big woman, short but very, very large. Was quite teased as the grandchildren would occasionally go stay with her. And one of the things they always said when they went to stay with her was, Aunt Pearl, will you turn over so I can get your big fat leg off of me? So anyway, she was just one of the sweetest people I know of, and Mother and them loved her dearly.
And so how did the rose bush get to be called Aunt Pearl?
Mostly because she raised these roses, and she liked flowers a lot, and she raised a real pretty pink eggshell-looking rose that was beautiful. And so when we found one in on Dick's front woods, is where I first got mine, and we called it Aunt Pearl. So it was never Aunt Pearl for sure a name, but we liked it.
How about Aunt Lil?
Aunt Belle was one of Mother's oldest sisters, and she got the reputation of being the meanest one of them, I guess you'd say. And I sometimes think that one of the reasons she did, even though she was a little firmer than the others, because she was the oldest, she went to work, and she had things that the other girls wanted and messed with. All of her clothes, all of her, the tale is told about her with her little trunk. All of them had little trunks, and she got books, and she'd put her books in the trunk, and so they wouldn't get them, and lock them up as she went to work so they couldn't read them. So they just took the hinges off after she went to work and read the books and put them back in and put the hinges back, and she never knew the difference. But they got in all of her things, so I can understand her meanness in some ways.
Now, she owned the house next door to where Grandma lived. Uncle Pete's
She
house,
bought
right?
the house in later
On
years,
Garfield?
yes. Next, Mother's, grandmother's house was on 5 city lots, and another lot beside it was a house built, and Aunt Lil bought that in later years. And she also bought the one on the corner of 12th and Garfield in later years, the lot. But she had those for a while.
So she was the rich aunt.
She was more of a business person. When she and her husband were given a portion of the lot on 12th Street in Garfield, that when my Uncle Pete gave them the portion of the corner there, and they built a restaurant, and she and her husband ran a restaurant that all of the Craddock-Terry at that time was down below them, and they ate lunches there all the time, and it was a well-known cafe in town. And so she was always working in business work, so I think that's part of it. She had more of a business head maybe than some of them.
Is she the only great aunt of my great aunts, or your aunts that worked outside the home that you remember? Or
No, because The Aunt Louise and Mother did some, but not a whole lot. But Aunt Louise and I'm sure Kitty did some, and Inez, they all worked in this local handbag factory that was Virginia Arts is what it was called. It was down on right next to the Armory downtown, in one of these old houses that was built there years ago, and they turned it into a plant. And she worked there, and Aunt Louise designed a lot of the purses and all, and she even had an ad in Mademoiselle magazine one time that of one of her handbags that she had designed, and Inez designed some of them, but Aunt Louise did more of the design work. But so
got the creative and the business and
oh, very much.
What about Uncle Harry?
Uncle Harry was Mother's oldest brother, and she was next to him in age, and they were very close. She always was very fond of Uncle Harry. And he had...
he was part of the Big Island crew, right?
He lived at Big Island in his later years, in his formative years, rather. He had 5 children, and he married a woman named Hesper that was my mother's best friend, and her sister was my Aunt Mary's best friend. So they loved Hesper. They were crazy about her. And after the last child was born, Joyce Ann, she was probably about a year old, I guess, Hesper died with leukemia. So Uncle Harry was left with 5 children. So he did marry, and the woman that he married, they never cared much for. they never liked her at all, but they were crazy about his first wife. But, so that's kind of what he did.
Okay, that's
And he was a shoemaker.
And that was pretty much prevalent in your family too, correct?
Well,
Braddock Terry, you had right
somewhat. This on the other side, of course, but Uncle Harry Wright made shoes and repaired shoes, and that's what he had at Big Island, was a shoe shop. Always had it up there too. So he was known for his making of shoes. Like a Geppetto, I guess. I don't know.
How about Aunt Grace?
Aunt Grace was quite talented in sewing. She was very good with making clothes and things, and she also had 5 children. And she lived next door in Aunt Lel's house that she had bought next to Grandmother. She lived next door there until she moved to Baltimore and lived there. She lost most of her children to cancer. I think all of them died with some form of cancer.
But not before her.
No, she had diabetes, and I think she was deceased with that.
Huh? Okay. Okay. Aunt Hazel, otherwise known as
Dick.
That's right. And why was that?
Well, we've been told, whether it's true or not, I don't know, but the kids would tease her as a younger and ask her, has she spelled her name Hazel? And she said D-I-C-K, Hazel. So they told her that, I'm sure, and teased her about it, so she became known as Dick. But her husband, Uncle Harry, did not like her called that, so he asked if they go back to calling her Hazel.
And that's what he called her? I don't remember.
Oh, he
that.
always called her Hazel. He never called her Dick. He never called her that. So.
And how switching gears in the middle, how did your connection with her get get close enough that they offered you guys land to build the home?
I think Aunt Dick and I became close way back when I was about 12, and before she married Harry, and she asked Mother if I could come over and stay with Grandmother at nights while she went out and helped Harry renovate the log cabin that they moved into that was next door to us. And I think that I got close with her then, and then over the years I would go out and help clean her house after she got married, and every weekend I'd go out and take the bus from school and go out at that time. And
they had buses?
Yeah, it had buses. Well, it wasn't a school bus, it was a city bus.
Oh, okay.
And it went out, and I would get off and go way across the field there, which now is Shoals and all of those places, and go clean her house. So we got close then as well. And so as time went on, you guys kind of became her grandchildren, I think, as much as anything. And when we were looking around for a place. She and Harry were getting older, and they asked if we would be interested in building next door to them, which was the orchard, had been their orchard. And so we agreed to it. So I think for $1 we bought the land,
Okay.
which was nice. And anyway, that's how we got closer, I think, and how we became closer with them than some of the other cousins, but mostly that way. But that's kind of where it was.
That makes, all right, then we'll go to Aunt Mary.
Aunt Mary, of course, was Mother's closest sister. They were very close, and Aunt Mary lived in Richmond, and we got to see her some and thoroughly enjoyed being with her. As I said, she and Mother were very close. I didn't get to be with her children too much because she didn't get to come home but every so often. And when she did, she visited my grandmother, and I was there sometime, but not all time. So I didn't get to be
So
with
how
her.
did your connection with Judy, who was Mary's daughter, how did that closeness happen then with the
Well, I
distance?
think that Judy and I really did not get close until after you kids came along.
Mm-hmm.
After she was in college and I was married, and then she got married. And then when our children came along, we started seeing each other for some reason and visiting back and forth, and got real close as the children grew up and together, and we finally became as close as sisters, really. But up until that time, up until you all were coming along, we weren't that close at all.
Huh, interesting. That after the fact you were. All right. Well, now relate the story of her dad, Uncle Raymond, and your dad, the war story. That's
That goes way back because
Well, it does before you
my
were
father
born.
and her father, Raymond, along with a few others in town, were all together in World War I, and they were friends, and they all served in France together. And there were a number of them in town that we were close with after they came back from the war, that Daddy was close with. But Uncle Raymond and Daddy were together, and my father liked to shoot crap with the guys, and among other things. And he, in a crap game, the prize that he won was 2 Italian vases. And so to get them back home, that was a problem. So he talked with Uncle Raymond and asked him to bring them back, and then they would check after he got back. So some years later at Judy's house, Uncle Raymond was there for lunch with us, and he proceeded to talk about those vases and how they came to be in his possession, and they happened to be on Judy's mantle because she had them now. So I immediately jumped on Judy with, that is my vase too. One of those Italian expensive vases are mine. And she, of course, said, no, you'll never get those vases. And I have not yet.
That's right. We need to talk to John before
Well,
before he
and her
leaves us.
son, David, did tell me he wrapped them up the other day. So they're wrapped up. He didn't say I was going to get them.
No, they're wrapped up to put on his mantle.
Exactly, which is fine. I always teased her. I never cared a thing about getting them.
Not a materialistic person, so I'm sure. All right, now we're moving on to Aunt Louise.
Aunt Louise was a loner in a way. She said that one reason she is there was a boy on one side of her and difference on the other side as far as the kids to have a companion. And she said, I never had anybody. So she loved to be by herself, though. She loved to read. She loved to go off by herself and do things. So part of it was her nature, but she was quite talented. As I said, she designed handbags. She did artwork. She did lots of beautiful watercolors. She did wedding announcements. That at one time Cynthia was in Richmond and she saw a wedding announcement at a friend's house, and she said, oh, that's so pretty. That looks just like the one that I have that Aunt Louise did. And they looked at it, and it was Aunt Louise's.
Wow.
That through Aunt Mary, somebody had contacted her to do their wedding invitation. So she was quite talented and quite not artsy, but very much like that. I enjoyed being with her a lot. And I was also born on her birthday, so I got part of her name.
That's right, yes, did Amanda. So there we go. All right, how about Thelbert?
Thelbert, really it was called Boots. That's what we all knew him as, Uncle Boots. He was had a real cute sense of humor, just cute as it could be, and we always enjoyed being around him. And one of the things I remember partly with him was every Sunday when I was at grandmother's and before I was there, he and his wife Hazel always came and went to grandma's every Sunday and sat on the porch and visited and then went back home. And Hazel, his wife, she was a card. She was cute as a button, and mother and them loved her. She was the two in-laws that they had, but they loved the first Hesper, and they loved Hazel just as if she were their own, so, which is pretty good to have 9 girls to accept you, so that was pretty good.
That is for sure. And where did the Boots come from that you know of?
I have no idea. I don't really, never heard, I don't think, so I don't know where it came from.
Unsolved mystery.
Now I won't know because I don't know who to ask.
Maybe Pam knows. I'll ask her. Alrighty, how about going to Inez and Smoking Cavalier?
Well, the Smoking Cavalier was another one of those names your daddy put on him. You know, he always stuck names on. Excuse me. He always stuck names on people. But Inez was also talented. She did some artwork. She didn't do as much as Aunt Louise, but she was quite talented, and she would like to read. I remember we took books to her many a time, and she loved to read, so she was a typical Wright in getting that and her did that. So
then we come to little Miss Lottie, otherwise known as
Kitty. If I understand correctly, Kitty came from the cats that she liked, and she would call them. And she hated Lottie. She never liked her name. She was named after her aunt, which was my grandmother's sister. She was named after her, but she never liked the name of Lottie. So I think she might even named herself Kitty. I don't know. She was the youngest, and she was a lot of fun. She loved antique furnitures and doing furnitures and taking care of things, interior decorating that way. She was quite talented like those lines. But
now, did mention your mother and father. What stories do you remember of Grandma? How did she handle 5 kids? And I know your dad had to leave town a lot, did he not?
Well, he didn't leave town a lot. He worked with Craddock Terry, and he had a steady job there. But he was in the National Guard, and he would leave usually a week or two. The National Guard left town. And Mother always said that she really tried to have the children while he was gone because he got in the way. And of course, they most often had them at home then.
Right.
So she said, I always liked to see if I couldn't plan the kids to be born while John is at camp. And I'm sure that tickled him as well. But anyway, he really didn't travel a lot otherwise.
Except when he was younger.
Yeah.
Relate that story of when he was quit his chores and took off.
Well, when he was a young man and he lived at home, and of course his mother also died quite young, and there were 2 girls, younger girls, and they had to be put in the orphanage because my grandfather couldn't take care of them. And his father was a farmer, and he liked gardens, but I don't think he ever cared about farming that much. He was probably about 15, I guess. And the stories said that he was out hoeing the ground and taking care of the garden, which he didn't care for. And he just put his hoe down and said, I quit. And he went on and started hopping trains and went to Chicago and I don't know where all, or at 15. And then I think he did that for about 3 or 4 months. And when he came back, his dad was sitting on the porch. And when he walked up to the house, his dad said, well, are you ready to finish the hoe now that you left? And that's all was ever said about him going. So I don't know, they didn't pay any attention to kids taking off, I guess, then. So, and of course, and he also had to go to work in Lynchburg, and he went across the Southern Trestle to get from Madison Heights to Lynchburg to go to work every day, because I guess he knew the schedule of the trains and didn't have to worry about it. Maybe it wasn't as many of them either. but he crossed the trestle every day to go to work. So did a lot of things that seemed dangerous to us, as well as hopping freights and whatever. So
He left Grandma a widow at a pretty young age. How did she do with were all of you guys gone at that point, or was Shirley was still home?
no, I was still there, and
You were
Shirley
still
and
there.
Peggy. With three of us still at home. Dick and Mary were gone. Well, actually, I think Dick got married in June before Daddy died in October. And Daddy was about 50 years old when he died, and Mother was left a widow to break 48. And then, like I said, she had the 5 children. Though Dick was still home some, but I don't think he had left by that time. But anyway, she managed, I guess, pretty well, but it wasn't easy, I'm sure.
No.
But anyway, that I don't, at that time you didn't know what Mother was putting up with and what she wasn't, because it was Mama. She'd go handle it.
Right,
So,
right. And it sounds like she had a good support system with sisters and
Well,
brothers anyway. So
she had a good support
as far as
system.
emotional support, I don't know about financial. but
Exactly.
yeah.
I think that was true, probably, that they certainly kept in touch and all. So that helps.
Now, did you have any kind of, I remember Aunt Virginia's name on your dad's side, but the other siblings, did you have any kind of contact with them after adult years?
Daddy's oldest sister Lizzie and her husband were at our house every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
She was a funny lady. She came over right often, and they would stay a little while, and then they'd leave, and then she was touchy as far as feelings sometimes, and she would get mad with us or with Daddy or with Mama. I don't know what all. They never knew what. And she'd stay away for about 2 weeks, then she'd come on back again, and they'd visit again. So anyway, she was there. The Daddy's second sister, Frances, who really was kind of headed up the family, I think. She owned a farm in Carolina, in Sanford, North Carolina. And she had a tobacco farm down there. And of course, that's where we went down. Dick and Charles and I would go every summer down there and help them get the tobacco put in and put up. And we had a good time. We got in the creek and all that sort of thing after working in the tobacco all day, which was stinky as it could be, and give you a headache, and your hands were black. It was terrible. But anyway, it was not the best working type situation, but we were fed well and had a good time and enjoyed it, so it wasn't that bad. Then because he had, Virginia was his sister, and Lucy, the youngest one, and they were the ones that were put in the orphanage when the mother died, and they were taken out when they got to be 18, I think they left. Daddy had only one brother, that was Bill, or William, and he was Charles's dad, and we always enjoyed being with him. He worked with Appalachian for years, but anyway, that kind of what most of his family was.
Well, one thing that someone was asking is, it occurred to me, what traits do you see in your children and grandchildren and in yourself from some of your aunts and uncles or some even Daddy's people? What do you see in subsequent generations?
That's kind of hard to say. We always said that my sister Peggy was like my Aunt Lucy, that she looked a lot like her, I think, because Peggy was pretty. She had the dark hair and the deep hazel eyes and real pale skin, and she was very pretty. And Lucy was always with all of us when we were little. She was the one that would, if the kids were sick, she'd come help you, do that sort of thing. And then it said that when we all had whooping cough, she came over and stayed with us. Mother had about 4 kids then, I guess, and that every time that one of us would hoop, well, with whooping cough, you go, and you can't catch your breath. And every time we did that, she would do it too, till we caught our breath again. But she was very sweet. She left quite early in my childhood and moved away, and we kind of lost track of her. I have no idea really on what she is. But it's kind of hard to say. whose traits and what's. I mean, you know, just off the top
I
of
didn't
your
know if
head.
anybody had ever over the
No,
years kind of hit you like, that's something so-and-so would have done or said, or...
Well, quite a few things, I'm sure, but it just doesn't come to mind at this point that how much that
Yeah.
that people do remind you of others. I think that, but I'm sure there's plenty.
Well, and here we're totally switching gears now. Well, not necessarily. One, it is said, and it's obvious that you, throughout your life, you've never been a smoker, never been a drinker, and was that a conscious decision, or you just kind of fell into that, or was based on what you saw growing up, or just
I don't
happened
know
way?
that it was. I think it could have been part of that, but it was based on what you were exposed to. But I don't think that it actually was. I just was never interested in it. I was never interested in smoking, and that was in my home all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was never interested in drinking, and that was in the home. I wasn't a big party person. My sisters, my older sister and Peggy, enjoyed going out constantly, dance halls and things like that. I never cared about doing that. So that's where you'd be exposed a little more to that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I married, of course, I married somebody who did not smoke or drink. So I think we just kind of carried it on together because that's what we liked. It wasn't necessarily conscious, it was just there.
Yeah,
So,
or not there.
yeah, or the lack of. But
Pausing. All right. What particular artifacts do you have of your family? And as for example, the medallion that Aunt Louise made, or even the little crystal thing you've got back there. Do you have any other?
well, we
Artifacts
have
and
not a
mementos?
whole lot. I do have a cupboard that my great grandfather, I understood, made, and it has the pegs, wooden pegs. They didn't use nails and they didn't use screws. They used wooden pegs, and that dates it as to the age sometimes. And I do have that cupboard that was his, and I also have a washstand, a marble top washstand that was supposedly been a piece of my grandmother's wedding. I think wedding suit. When they married, then their dowry more or less was that type of thing. And this was, I think it had a dresser and a washstand and a bed and a chair or something. And this was that. I think some of the others, I think Kitty's children have some of the other pieces. But I don't know of too many other things. I have, as you say, this was given, the Aborigine or whatever thing there was given to me by the Bohemian Luster, I think is what it's called, was given to me by Aunt Louise, and that belonged to Ms. A.G. Jefferson, the second, I think, that she had given to her, and she passed it on to me. And then Aunt Louise also made the medallion tree, that Christmas tree that was made from all the memorial artifacts that we had stood for different things of the family, of my immediate family, and she made it into a picture frame thing. And it's I can't think of anything special other than those things that we had, but that was pretty much all of them.
Do you have any anecdotes of your extended family as far as brother-in-laws and nieces and nephews and that type of, and sister-in-laws, whatever the case may be? Any particular stories that...
Well, I don't know. One of the things that I think comes to mind is, Shirley, my youngest sister, her husband, Leroy, was a rough talking person. He was a bricklayer, a construction person, had a heart of gold, really did. He loved her and the family dearly. When he was young, his mother left he and his brother with their mother, with her mother, and took off. And so the grandmother had to raise them. And then she came back and married, I think. I don't know whether she married or what, but anyway, she had 3 other children, 2 girls and a boy, and left again. And with Grandma, so Grandma had to keep him again. Leroy went into the Marines, joined the Marines when he got old enough. And when he came out of the Marines, the girls were in the orphanage. The 2 younger girls had to be put in the orphanage. And the first thing he did was get them out of the orphanage and pay to keep them with Grandmother and to be with the family. So I said he might have been rough outside, but he was heart of gold inside. So I think that's one of the things. I don't know, there's all kinds of things that happened throughout the years.
Right.
That it's kind of hard. I remember my brother, he was in the, excuse me, Drum and Bugle Corps, which was a little, probably 12 to 15 or something, that practiced at the Army and went in parades and things like that. So we lived out in Madison Heights at the time, and they had a parade, and he had to be in the parade, and we went to see the parade. He went over, we didn't have a car, we didn't drive, but he went over with friends, and when the parade was over, he was supposed to come back with them, and he didn't for some reason, and he went with someone else, and he wasn't about 12, I guess. And I know when he came, when we went on home to Madison Heights, and of course Mother and them were worried sick because they didn't know where he was. And he did show up because he had gone with someone else. And I just remember, it's the only time that I remember, because he was so frightened of my father, took a belt to him and beat him so much, or started to, that one of his friends interfered with it. But he was scared to death because of what had happened, which was the wrong way to go, of course. But I just remember that very vividly of what happened at the time.
Because it was so out of character for him, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, I don't think, my daddy talked you to, he'd talk you to death. You wish you'd sometimes beat you, get over with. But he would talk your troubles off, you know. But he never put his hands on us. Mother used a keen switch at all times, but he never did. But so that was the only time I remembered him ever putting his hands on us as far as beating and so forth. Which was,
well, tell the story of him doing the big speech in front of all the dignitaries.
oh my God, well.
Oh, no, dignitaries
Yeah,
they were. But.
as children, you know, we didn't have a lot of things to play with, but we played paper dolls a lot, the girls did. And we didn't have the cut-out paper dolls till later in life that you put on each new dress on the doll and that so forth. We had the Sears and Montgomery Ward catalogs, and we would cut out people out of those. And as we cut them out, if this was their dress to wear to work or whatever, we put them in certain sections of books and just put them together and kept them in there till we got to play with them. And the story goes that my father was before his fellow soldiers, more or less, teaching a class. I'm sure it must have been on how to set this rifle together or something of that sort. And when he got up to open the book to tell them about this, set this rifle, all these paper dolls went flying all over the whole room. So he was, of course, teased quite a lot about that. But he had a good sense of humor, and I'm sure he had a comeback that lasted fine and worked out well. But that's kind of what we did with them anyway. So that's kind of where our time went a lot.
Now, I do not know this story, but about your dad driving a car into a peach tree. What is that story?
Well, actually, like I say, we didn't have a car. And our house was so that you pulled up to the back to go in the back door, most people did. And Daddy always had friends. Every weekend it came drinking friends. They stayed until the liquor went out, until they passed out, and they stayed and spent the night. But anyway, so he had a friend spending the night that night that had a car that pulled up at the back door. And Dad got up the next morning, and he did not only have a car, he didn't know how to drive. So he got in the car and decided he was going to drive it. So the house next to us was to the side. So he put the car in reverse, backed into the car, backed into the house next door, knocked the column off the porch, and that wasn't enough. He decided to put in forward gear, so he went around the back of our house and hit had a pear tree. So, of course, from then on, he was known as a pear-picking son of a gun. But anyway, he didn't live that one down either. Yeah.
I think we've covered pretty much everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to relay about
At this time, I
mom,
don't-
dad, aunts, uncles, whomever?
Oh, well, there's a lot more yet, but I'm sure that's
there
sufficient. I'm sure that's sufficient. So,
All right,
So-
then. Well, thank you for your time.
well, thank you, Miss, for having it.